Righto, here we go again. Bunch of happy Tassa people, a bunch of happy Terra Australisans. And we don't know what we're going to talk about today, but we know some of it. We have no agenda. We're winging it. We're winging it.
Yeah. Yeah. We
Yeah.
are. It's been a bit of a weird week, I think. I just want to point out to everyone at the moment that, and I don't know if we've covered it on the calls yet, but what we think is 24 hours, I'm pretty sure I watched a video a week or two ago, and it actually is 19 hours. And they've been documenting this with monks and people who make candles and all, like, we're talking very credible sources from different parts of the world are all saying that we actually now get about 19 hours instead of 24 hours. So if you feel like life's going faster, you're actually factually correct. And that's why we're finding it harder to fit everything in because we're trying to just cram it all in. And you think about it, that's almost a quarter of a day is lost.
Hmm.
That's a 25% reduction in in
Well,
in the time.
somebody's definitely been stealing my hours. I know that.
Mm.
I put my
So,
head on the pillow when I finally get there, and the next thing you know, da 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 da. Come on, Ryan, get up. I'm like, oh, I don't
yes.
think I even went to sleep. But yeah, well, that's interesting, eh? But it does feel true. It does feel true. Uh,
Yeah.
um, right. Anybody got anything they'd like to report? You got any stories, Ray, that you want to tell us? Have you got you at all? Or
Not at the moment. I got to think of some. I got to
okay,
think of
well,
so many.
okay, well, we'll leave you thinking then. So, do we want to? There was something else I was going to mention on today's call, and I can't think what it was, but it'll come back to me as we move forward. Do you want to start on Anna's documents then, Sarah, and we'll just see
Yeah.
where it takes us because there'll be multiple subjects in there.
There's a lot. So, I mean, we could probably just do today just on Anna's docs because there's quite a lot of stuff in there. Um, da, 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 da. Alrighty. So the last one last week we discussed was the trusteeship of the Davila Family Trust. So saying that there are three parts to the trust. Anna's only responsible for the land part of the trust. There's a guy called Alan, who is a British territorial, who is responsible for the maritime, and Harold, who is a Roman Catholic, and he's responsible for air. Now, none of them can do anything about getting rid of the others. It's not a committee. They're just separately operating in regards to their section of the trust.
And
Okay.
did they try and get rid of Anna? Is that what I read? They
Well, apparently, but we'll get to that later on. So, but I'm just
okay.
sort of going over the last of the last week's one. So, the next one she put out after that is a memo which has been issued to all court officers operating in America, letting them know exactly who they can and cannot operate against. She goes through the whole process of the fraud, explains how it's been corrected, and she now is saying anyone that moves against any state national is going to be and can be held personally liable and accountable. She reminds everyone that legislation does not replace law, and municipal, local, corporation governments have no authority on the land. In America, they all know that. Over here, I'm pretty sure they're slow on the uptake. There is a public law, and court officers are reminded that they are obligated to uphold that public law. And public law is basically what we kind of operate under. Um, and we'll get to this later on too, but in the Roman Curia, which is what we're all sort of operating under, public law is basically soil or land law. Okay.
Okay.
So that's the first one. Then the next one was another public notice, and she's talking about the smear campaign that's been put out against Anna and Hunter. She reminds everyone that they are two people who have publicly said repeatedly that they do not believe in money. And Anna has said that. I've heard her. She says money is it's just a scam. Fiat money technically belongs in the air jurisdiction, and remembering that air jurisdiction is where everything that is made up, so weights and measures, currency, monarchies, stuff like that, It only has value because people have decreed it so. You can't eat it, you can't build with it, you can't wear it. The only useful thing it does is it gives people a semblance of freedom, because if you have some in your pocket, you can obtain food, shelter, and etc. The minute that it goes digital, even that freedom though is taken away, because the minute you say, no, I don't agree, they can zero everything in your account, and your digital money is gone. Uh, the reason that they're actively lying, the bad guys are lying and cheating and making up things about Anna and Hunter, is because the fraud is being exposed and the bad guys want that to stop. Now, some of this lying and cheating is taking the form of using AI and CGI to make Anna and Hunter put up videos showing them saying things that we would know to be wrong. But if people don't know, they could go, oh, they're saying X, Y, Z. And we know that that's all fake and everything else. We know it happens all over the time, but she's just bringing that to everyone's attention. Now, this next one's pretty interesting. She says, remember, big oil is dead. Now, this is actually quite juicy, this one. I thought it was anyway. So in Canada, there have been so recently around the world, or in the world, there's an isotope that has been found called helium-3, and it is massively, massively, massively productive in terms of energy. Okay, you only need a tiny little amount to create a huge amount of energy. But up until now, it's been tremendously hard to find. It's hard to extract. It's been prohibitively expensive to do anything, like to get it out to use it. And so it's kind of been, even though it's this amazing source of energy, it's kind of been shelved as a realistic prospect, because, no one thought that there was any. Having said that, it has now been found in Canada in deposits which are big enough to power human civilization for millennia, in a way that Canadian technology right now has the ability to extract and turn into energy. So I'm just going to read what I've written here, and then we can expand it out. So helium-3 has been found in Canada and is the cleanest energy to be found anywhere. Canada alone has found deposits enough to power human civilization for millennia. It's also been found in Greenland, Iceland, other places right up north, like way up that top of the planet. It can be used for nuclear fusion, not nuclear fission, but nuclear fusion. So there is no long-term radioactive waste, no greenhouse gas emissions, no runaway reactors or reactions. 1 kilo of helium-3 produces the same amount of energy as 20 million kilograms of coal. And yes, those figures are correct. Or 15 million litres of petrol. One pickup truck or a lorry of helium-3 could power the entire United States for a year. Helium-3 is produced by solar wind, and until now, any amounts have been negligible and hard to access. But Canada's just found amounts in magnitudes that could power the world for hundreds of years to come if people want to be nice to Canada, because they're taking control of it through their universities and Canadian companies. So they're being smart. They're not just letting other corporations come in and dig mines randomly and then dump slag in rivers and so affect the rest of, oh, sorry, I'm not talking about Australia. I'm talking about Canada, who are actually looking after Canadians. At the same time, all of the noise about overpopulation and green energy has died down, and it has. They're not talking about that too much anymore. The bad guys are hoping that we will just forget what they've been doing with our money for the last decade or four, and they'll get away with it. They're hoping that if they just stop talking about it, they don't remind us about COVID and the jabs and everything else, that we'll just go, oh, well, never mind, that was then, let's just move on. The next thing is the housing boom in America is just broken. It's predicted that it will take 6 generations to recover. So roughly, what are they saying? It's about 20 years to a generation. So they're saying probably about 120 years to recover. But at this stage, it's crashed and presumably going back to like 1950s prices. What has happened in China, which is, where they built all of those buildings and cities and whatever, and no one lived in them, that's now happening in America. But America has also got a population decline the same as everywhere in the Western world. Israel is about to be sacrificed by the Brits. So read that, the Rothschilds, because if you remember, Israel was set up because the Rothschilds did a deal with Britain to put the Jewish people over in Israel, which they stole from whoever was there at the time, and they created this state. And now Israel, aka Netanyahu, has become an embarrassment. So they're going to get rid of Israel because they don't need it, because the Brits went in and remember they've installed a puppet in Iran. And that's so much bigger and better than Israel. So they're going to get rid of Israel, and because they don't need oil from the Middle East, because they're being nice to Canada and they're going to give us your helium-3. So that's sort of what's going on there. Germany has no fuel. The Nord Stream pipeline was destroyed by Russia, allegedly, because that's what you do. You blow up your own pipelines. But now Germany has to play nice with Putin because Putin's the only guy around that's got the energy that they need to actually keep warm and keep the lights on. Now, we don't hear about any of this because the media is run by the CIA. And she then says we need to get rid of the Roman Curia. That's what we we're talking about before. The Pope invented all of this stuff that is used to control people. He invented monarchs, he invented GovCo, he invented, not this specific Pope, but the Vatican. Monarchy, money, weights, measures, time, corporations / governments, whatever. They made all of that up, and they were supposed to control it. And they weren't until Anna actually traveled to the Vatican and laid it all out and said, this is your job. You are supposed to do this. And he went, oh. So then he dissolved USA Inc., which has gone into Chapter 7, involuntary bankruptcy, introduce of Doge and Trump going through and all the rest of it. And the corporations are supposed to be functioning lawfully. Quite a few have already gone. However, so what do we choose? Dow Chemicals, Kaiser Permanente, IG Farben have all gone. From memory, they're all like big chem or big whatever. However, Pfizer, Monsanto, and Bayer, the Bank of International Settlements, World Bank, including all the central bank members. Now, she says all gone. I don't know whether she means have all gone or whether she wants them all gone. Having said that, Sue might be able to make some comment about this in a minute, because there was a very interesting video that she sent me, which I sent to Assembly Connect, and hopefully they'll put it up. But in any case, Bank of International Settlements, World Bank, central bank members all need to go. The UN corporations, Securities Exchange Commission, government corporations, municipal local councils and courts, and all of the departments all need to go. So there was a lot in that one document. That's a huge amount of stuff. Did you want to talk about that bank thing, Sue? Just because it's a bit relevant?
How long? I can't remember which one I sent you, Sarah. There's so much.
2 days ago, and there was a guy on Facebook, and he's in Melbourne, standing outside the Federal Reserve Bank of Australia, and it was all boarded up. And he said it's boarded up. And I'll tell you, it's because it's undergoing refurbishment, but it's actually under military occupation. He said, and I bet you if you went to the Federal Reserve Bank in Canberra, you'd find the same kind of stuff. And he said all of the reserve banks around the world, particularly the one in America, are the same. So he was basically saying the same thing, but he was standing outside of the Reserve Bank in Melbourne, and yes, he was correct. It was boarded up, no one going in, no one going out. It was, the lights were off, no one was home.
I think you'll find that's a part of the bankruptcy that's been happening. Just the fact that they're probably been taken over by some other administrator. So they'll be operating it from somewhere else. And I remember reading an article of over a year ago that the exact same thing had already happened over in the United States, that their own banking institutions, the Federal Reserve, there was a lot of those buildings that had already been boarded up as well. And they said, like, Washington, D.C. is dead. Like, a lot of the financial buildings just aren't open anymore. So I'm not quite sure where they've gone or how they're operating. But it is all part of just this continual bankruptcy cycle that they've had us on for well over 100 years, to the point where they've really got nothing left to collateralize, have they? Like, that's why fiat currencies always fail, because they run out of things as collateral. Like, they can't borrow any more money because they've got nothing left to hock on our behalf. They have always maintained it's for us. Like that. That's why they classify us as the government and justify what they do, because they say, well, you're the government. We're doing what you want us to do for you. And that's all. It's, more of their double speak. I think if they ask around, a lot of people are definitely not believing that what they're doing is for us any longer, because they've created corporations that benefit, and they've really lost the idea of why they're supposed to be there. And any government is supposed to be there for only two reasons, and that's to protect the people and their assets. Yeah, so they've become the very monster that they were supposed to protect us from. And I think most of them just are flailing. They have got no idea how to get out of it. So they double down and just continue the lie, because they're looking at it as too hard to do anything else. But we, the people, have already decided that's not going to work anymore, which is why it will go. It will collapse, the fiat system, because it has to. That's just the logical reality of it.
Yeah.
And why people like us are saying, okay, so we better learn to self-govern people. We better learn how to communicate with one another and actually articulate what it is we do want these corporations to do on our behalf, and perhaps start putting principle ahead of profit.
Yeah.
Like, it's the principle of protect your fellow man and our assets, rather than be only interested in like who can get the most out of it. We've got to get rid of the mindset of competition. There's always a winner and a loser. That's got to go. This really is a change in people's thinking and heart space. Like, be ye renewed by the renewing of your mind. So that's where it changes first. And the banking problems of the world are just a reflection of that. We're going to have to step into the void as they just disappear.
Yeah.
So that we're not treated even worse like cattle.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's the banking part of it. But then, there's all the helium-3 stuff and everything that's going on out there in the world. And I know some people go, oh, look, you shouldn't focus on what's going out in the world. We should focus on what's at home. And absolutely, we should focus on what's at home. But I don't think it hurts us to be mindful of the fact that we are part of a worldwide community. And I think everyone on this channel or this chat and everyone that watches is aware that we've not ever shied away from the fact that we are part of a galactic community as well. And so in that case, this world becomes our local community. So we need to know what's going on elsewhere in the world.
Couldn't help yourself, could you, Sarah?
No, absolutely not. I will always support our brothers and sisters out there in the sky.
Of course.
Okay. So the next one is an interesting public notice, and she's pretty much talking to the Roman Curia, and she's saying, do your job, keep your corporations in line. You're going to have to start arresting and prosecuting the corporations that have killed, maimed, and otherwise harmed humanity. If you don't do that, we're going to start arresting you. So it would also appear that the US, and I don't completely understand this, but I think what's happening is that the Supreme Court in America, which is the national or, federal kind of court, has just passed a ruling that says that they cannot override what is happening, what states rule at their state level, which sounds a bit weird, because over here we've always said that the states can't overrule the national, but you got to remember that over there, they are nation states. They are their own state in and of themselves, and they're all different little countries. That's how they started out. So I think what's happening is the courts are waking up to that, and they're going, oh, crap, we can't actually tell another country what to do. So you might want to just back off on all of your overriding here until we figure out who's who in the zoo. So I think the legal profession in America is starting to actually wake up to the fact that things are not the same as they were, and we actually have to start minding our P's and Q's. Over here, things are a little different. We are one country, and as many of you will remember in COVID, what was it? It was someone help me, the biosecurities bit in the federal, ruling or the act, the Biosecurities Act, overrode the state legislation because we are one country. We're not lots of little countries. So having said that, whatever's going on lawfully and legally over there, that will trickle down through to here, as will all of these other things that we just talked about. So the housing crash, all of those other things, money, banks, corporations, everything else, it will trickle down to here. So hopefully legal personnel over here will start to realize too what's kind of going on. Okay, next one. It was an international public notice entitled Rebus Sic Stantibus, which is Latin for as things stand. Now, apparently, this clause is used as an escape clause in case things pop up. So it's used as an escape clause in any kind of situation where there's a rules of engagement in case things pop up that were not anticipated. And if anyone knows the Monty Python things, no one anticipates the Spanish Inquisition. But Russia has just invoked this clause on the Hague Conventions on Law and Customs of War. So essentially, Russia has basically said now the only thing they will guarantee is that they will not knowingly hurt or target civilians. Everyone else is fair game. So what that essentially is saying is, and there must be some laws and customs of war which say, because I haven't read it, but there must be some kind of law that says if you go in and you take over a country, you can't just behead their, commander-in-chief. You can't just do this. You can't just arrest all of the politicians because Russia's gone, nah, all those rules thrown out the window, not doing it. Because as things stand in Ukraine, we know Zelensky is a puppet leader that comes from Florida or somewhere. He's a comedian. We know that the actual factual Ukrainian government was basically taken out by the CIA quite a few years ago. We know that actually and factually, Russia has not broken any rules up to this point in the Ukrainian conflict. They have acted exactly as they said they would. And they have acted and honored the agreement that was written between Russia and NATO. They said, NATO, you can't come any closer to us. And NATO said, sure, we won't come any closer to you, and then proceeded to get closer every single year. Russia had an agreement where they could, if people in certain regions that had originally been Russian said, we can't get governance, we can't make it work, we want to come back to Russia, can we be ruled by Russia? Russia said, yep, that's okay. That was written into the agreement. That's what they're actually doing in Donetsk and Donbass. And everyone's going, oh, no, this is a war. No, it's not a war. So the West has repeatedly broken terms of agreement and acted in bad faith over and over and over again. And we should not be surprised. This is what they do to us as well. So it's no big deal. It's a big deal, but it's not hugely surprising. It has become normal for governments to lie, cheat, steal, and commit all manner of atrocities and pretend that they're allowed to, or that it didn't even happen. Okay? They said there weren't chemtrails or free energy. They said there aren't ETs. They said there was no weather warfare. They said Sasquatches and mermaids don't exist. Egyptian hieroglyphs in America and Australia, that's all just not real, except, there are agreements about the chemtrails. There's contracts. There's agreements about free energy. There's treaties with ETs. There's patents on weather warfare. So all these things that they're telling us, oh no, that's not real. You're a conspiracy theorist. That doesn't exist. Well, actually, there are Egyptian hieroglyphics in Australia. There are pyramids in Australia. King Tut's shield, his golden shield, came out of Kalgoorlie. They've basically fingerprinted the gold it's got its own chemical signature. Gold has its own chemical signature. Everywhere in the world, you can tell where gold comes from because it's got a very specific signature. King Tut, Shield, Kalgoorlie. So they can say all this stuff, but we know they lie. Okay? So what Russia is saying is, as things stand, because you've broken all the rules, this is what we're doing. So Anna is saying, in light of all of this stuff that's come to light, so chemtrails, free energies, blah, 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 she's saying, as things stand, we didn't expect to be collectively trafficked, press ganged, etc. So all bets are off. We're not keeping to your accepted rules of agreement. We're going to do what we've got to do. International public notice. After that, she's got the important points of law. And I'm pretty sure because there are some people out there saying, oh, you have to do all this work to prove that you're alive. Okay, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to sign up to this digital form, you've got to go through all of this questionnaire, you've got to do all this stuff to say that you're alive. And she says that any body, corporation, organisation, etc., that says we should sign up to an electronic anything to prove that we're alive should be told no. We've got thumbprints, some of us have footprints, we have the fraudulent birth certificates, which even though they're fraudulent, they still do establish that we were born, and that should be enough. That's their documentation telling us that we're here. We should not have to do any extra work to tell the corporations that told us we were dead that we are in fact alive. We shouldn't have to sign up to anything. So digital ID, no. International public notice in the form of an affidavit. So this is Anna basically putting together a public notice in the form of an affidavit. We know an affidavit is truth in law, but we are men and women, so we do it in the form of. Julius Shiver made Anna trustee of the land jurisdiction of the Davila Family Trust. He made a British territorial citizen the trustee of the sea portion and a Roman Catholic trustee of the air portion. Anna on the land holds the actual physical assets that all of the credit assets derive from. Attempts have been made by the other two trustees to have Anna removed from the committee, but the trusts are not part of a committee and she cannot be removed. She's also been accused of holding up the money, which she is not, and that is being done by the banks and the service providers who are afraid about missing out on their cut or being proved, irrelevant, which they pretty much are. And no paperwork, she says, no paperwork has ever crossed her desk specifically asking for her help in releasing the assets of the Spiritual White Boy Trust or the Alpha and Omega Trusts. Now, that's a little bit relevant because some people will be aware that recently in this country, we've had people talking about the Alpha and Omega Trusts, and there's been a bit of malarkey going on. And people are saying that Anna is holding things up. And she said she's never, ever seen a piece of paper asking her for help in any of that. So take that to be what you will. Then there's this weird one, international public notice. Apparently, 160 plus rabbis have just come out and said that Trump is the Jewish Messiah. Israel is no longer needed now that the Brits have Iran. Israel will be destroyed, as we discussed earlier, and Trump will not be able to help because I'm betting that they'll wait until his term finishes and then he has to step down because he will have served the relevant number of because you can only serve so many terms and then you've got to step down in America. So he won't be able to help because he will no longer be in office. And he has allegedly converted to Judaism. So the Zionist playbook says that you have to kill all the non-believers. So what she's saying, and I don't think she's joking, so you'd better start eating kosher food because it will be less poisonous than normal food. And there was a guy that recently did a video somewhere and he was talking about food for the goyim. And he said, you look at the products, he said, basically it's the same thing. This is the kosher one, this is the goy one. And he said, look at the ingredients on both of them. He said the kosher one is going to be a lot better for you than the normal goyim one. I really don't like any of those words, but anyway. We live in upside down world. Media is a scam or a sham, both. And if Trump is considered the Jewish Messiah, anyone not Jewish apparently is supposed to be killed. So she's saying, that's literally what the Jewish Messiah is supposed to do, according to their beliefs. Any non-Jew, it's fine to kill them, hurt them, do whatever you like, theoretically. So, having said that, there is a difference between Jews and Zionists. And I want people to remember, we've talked about this. Chinese aren't necessarily communists. Germans aren't necessarily Nazis. Jews aren't necessarily Zionists. Okay, so we need to be considered with our words. Then, change of pace, she puts out a Granabites for the Earth Angels and everyone else. And she puts up a video in which, and there's videos on a lot of these things, by the way. There's one on the oil, on the stuff that's been found in Canada. There's one about the Jewish Messiah. There's one about the courts. There's a whole lot of videos. Wayne will put them up in the description. But there's another video, and there's a guy called Michael who's in New Zealand, and he is offering a Reiki through YouTube to all. And he talks about, earth angels, we've talked about the M's on your hands. And if you are new to that, if you haven't sort of figured out what that means, if you haven't looked at your hands until recently, he talks a bit about the M's on your hands and all that kind of stuff. People like that generally have a resonance to many natural things like, energy. They're very susceptible to energy and fluctuations in energy and astrological stuff going on, to crystals, to herbs, all that sort of stuff. This video might be a really nice way to start learning some of what you know, because apparently I didn't watch it, but she says it's a lovely video. So that's been put up. The next one is a Granabites. So she's talking about data centers, county assemblies, and phony censuses. What is the plural of census? Censi?
Censuses.
It is censuses, okay. So apparently in America, I don't know about here, so I don't know about here. In America, Trump has decreed that data centers are all military installations, conveniently. However, they still need to be granted the land by the federal government. So essentially, even though the military can come into the state of Nebraska and say, we want to put a data center here, the federal government of the United States of America, I'm guessing, so the real one, has to grant them the land. Okay, so they can't build it unless they've got the land. So she's saying that you can push back in that way. You can go to your local assembly, then you can go to the federal assembly, and then you can say, no, we don't want them to have the land granted. Then she talks about county assemblies, or what we would call our local assembly. And she's saying that when you inhabit a local assembly, you also are inhabiting your national assembly. And we've been talking about that here. When you reconvey, you automatically become a member of two assemblies, your local assembly, so here on Bairnsdale, and also the National Assembly, so the larger one of the country. Two assemblies, and I inhabit both at the same time. Okay, so I deal with soil stuff at my local level, and I deal with, we talk about national situations at the national one. Okay, so in this particular one, in this Granabites, there is a lot of info on how land and soil work together. So what they each handle, how they come together, all that kind of stuff. So even though you've got soil being handled by local and land being handled by national, they still work together. Okay, so yeah. Anyway, and then the last one, people I think are talking about, do we have to take part in the census? This would be in America. And she said that they're mandated. So I think she said 10 years in America. If you work for the federal government over there, you may have to do the census, but if you don't, you're under no obligation at all to do anything about a census. And I would imagine it'd be pretty much the same here. So I know we've had census in the past here. Some people have done them, most people don't. So anyway, but it's no big deal one way or another. Then she puts out another Grana Bites, and she's talking about the Zionist playbook. Now, to be completely open and honest, I'm not really sure about this one. Ray would probably be the best person to talk about this. You'd have to understand the Bible and the book of Isaiah, but basically, she does this big long quote about personhood, and it's pretty much saying in the book of Isaiah that if you are decreed in the womb that you have a personhood coming up, they're saying that you've been anointed by God, their Jewish God, to rule over other people, either as a king or as a, in some position. And what she's saying is that personhood, when it was written in that Bible, when it was written down then, is not the same as personhood now, because personhood now could be a corporation. So yeah, it's just, and then she talks a little bit again about the Zionist playbook, saying that, Jewish people are allowed to hurt, maim, slaughter everyone else unless they conveniently happen to make life easier for the Jewish people by doing the crappy work that people don't want to do. Again, Zionist playbook, not the Jewish playbook. So anyway, we go back to international public notice, and then she talks about republics, the question of American republics. And I'm not going to go too far into that because we kind of sort of know that the whole fraud was done by Glosser. And essentially everything the Americans have done since 1861 was done by the Brits/Zionists. After the Civil War, they said to the country at large that the real government had disappeared. It was lost. We can't find it. It's gone away. But what actually happened was that they had labelled any members of that government that were left and tried to come back into their position. They had labelled them rebels and then sent out gangs of men who didn't know any better to basically beat them up, rob them, slander them, or murder them. So the government good guys that were left, they hid, as you would. And this is still going on. If you look at what's going on and what's happened to Anna over the last however many years, it's the same crap. They're still trying to hide the truth. The Pope, who is supposed to rein in his corporations because, well, he's supposed to rein them in, he's supposed to keep them in line. He hasn't because he profits. He profits from them doing what they do. So for him to actually rein them in, it means that his kitty is going to drop dramatically. So what she's doing is she's calling for the dissolution of Great Britain because the previous Pope got rid of the US Inc., or he sent them into bankruptcy. She's calling on Pope Leo to dissolve Great Britain. Remember, Great Britain is not England, Ireland, Wales, Scotland. Great Britain is it's their version, I suppose, over there of the United States of America, Inc. So Great Britain, Inc. is their version of conglomerating all of that. But remembering that Great Britain has all the offshoot corporations, so here, Canada, New Zealand, Jamaica, blah, 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 blah. If Great Britain dissolves or is dissolved by Pope Leo, which he should do because it is operating completely outside its remit, then that would dissolve everything. That would dissolve all of the governments around the world. Well, not most of them around the world. Then there's another international public notice which is talking about another false supposition. Apparently, people are trying to say that Julius Shiva was a British territorial citizen. Now, Julius Shiva, for those following along, is the person that first bought the Davila Family Trust to Anna and elected 3 trustees. Okay, and what they're trying to say now is that no, he wasn't ever an American. He was a British territorial citizen because he moved to somewhere. And she said, no, that's absolutely not true. He declared and lived and died as a South Carolinian. Then she talks about, in an international public notice, she talks about the fact that European feudalism is still alive and well. And I'm going to read directly from her. This was a straight cut and paste because it describes it much better than I could summarize it. And it works pretty much the world over. Whether or not the common people know this, when they use the title King Charles, they are invoking land jurisdiction. And when they call him His Britannic Majesty, they are invoking sea jurisdiction. And when they call him His Imperial Majesty, they are invoking air jurisdiction. These are separate offices that are attached to separate international jurisdictions of the law as follows. King equals land jurisdiction equals crown monarch. Sorry, equals the crown. Sorry, I forgot to put a full stop in there. So king, land jurisdiction, crown. Monarch, sea jurisdiction, scepter. Emperor, air jurisdiction, orb. Okay, so you've got the crown that he wears, you've got the scepter thing that he carries, and then I think there's an orb that he carries as well. All three offices are conveyed, conferred, and created by the Pope, who, remember the Pope way back when in the Human Sanctum said, I own the world, who, when these offices are settled on the chosen or inherited recipient, establishes an agreement on the land, a contract in the sea, and a covenant in the air with the new King, Monarch, Majesty, firmly subjugating said persons to the rule of the Pope and the Roman Catholic Church in its own established domains and venues. And this is fair and right because the Church created the system and defined these offices and gave these tokens, crown, scepter, and orb, of earthly authority to the king/monarch/emperor. So again, calling on the Pope Leo to dissolve the British Crown Corporation so as to end its enslavement of people all over the world. That's actually a really good article to read, just by the way. And I think that, just let me double check this. I'm pretty sure. Yep, that brings us to an end of the Anna documents. And here we are at 25 past the hour.
Well, there's a lot of information in there. And for anybody who hasn't been in this space before and you get hit with all that information at once, for us, we've been following the conversation, some of us for 2-3 years maybe, and the conversation has changed greatly, and it will continue to change, I believe. Anna is talking about different stuff today than she was talking about 2 or 3 years ago. And for us who have followed it, we can see a huge difference. She's been known to talk about the off-world stuff, the angels. And she's talking about Charlie there with where he is in the 3 jurisdictions. None of that was talked about before. It was all more practical. If you follow this stuff, it is all leading somewhere. I find it interesting that there's a huge housing crisis. Like that would have to be, you would think, the start of a financial collapse. I mean, that's something has to give first. And I always figured it would be the stock market. But a housing crisis affects people at a very, very basic level. There'll be, So I wonder if that's the start of things. I wonder every day what will be the first signs that we see in this country that things are finally beginning to crack. And I do recognise a few signs that I think might be relevant, but housing crisis in America could very easily overflow into something much bigger. Right.
No, I was just going to say there is so much to unpack from all of that. I might try in 2 goes, but Sarah brought up a very good point when she said about the people going, why don't we just focus on what's here and not elsewhere? That's exactly the kind of mentality that is scary in truth and freedom movements because that's what GovCo wants. They want us focused on what's in it for me so that they don't see the big picture. None of that shocks me because, again, I'm coming from the angle that the USA and the New World were formed for a particular purpose. The US Constitution on paper looks like it's the closest we've ever had to freedom on the planet by any government ever. That's in theory. In practice, before the ink dried, they were looking for ways to get out of that. They have never practiced what they preached. Never. That country, and I'm talking about not the people, I'm talking about the system. That country was formed for a particular purpose because what is the US of A? Everyone's claiming Europe is the home of civilization, which of course it's not, right? That's what they want us to believe. But if it were, why was the USA formed in the first place? Who were they running away from in Europe? Each other. You see, every accusation's a confession. Everything they accuse others of is what they do. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. The reason why Islam is under attack and all the lies are there in overdrive is because they are the last bastion that believe in the one God, the Abrahamic God, and they're the last major obstacle to the New World Order, which is why we constantly hear that they are under attack. Now, we talked about oxymorons before, like sovereign citizen, etc. Here's another one, Islamic terrorist. That is a big oxymoron because the Arabic word where Islam comes from is peace. So how can you have a peace terrorist? You see, this is Zionism 101. And this is what I was saying to you, World War I and every war since then is a Zionist banker war to create the state of Israel. The reason for World War I, and I go into this in great detail in my Telegram group, is because the Ottoman Empire was not lending money at interest, and the European banking system wanted to get their tentacles into the Islamic world. And by smashing the caliphate, which was in Turkey, you can then bring in the modern world, which Mustafa Kemal Ataturk did. And I don't know if I said this story on this webinar, but I've had this confirmed by my friend's cousin who went to Ataturk's grave, and it's true. He died in whatever it was, 1938, and you still have to stand 20 meters back from the grave because it stinks to kingdom come. So could that be him being punished in the grave for the betrayal of not just his people, but Islam and the world at large? Food for thought. So every accusation is a confession. Now, at the moment, the genocide in Palestine has escalated. It's horrendous now that the kids are getting killed, more so in overdrive, and now pregnant women as well, because they openly boast on Israeli TV that they have to go after pregnant women because they want the civilization of Palestinians eliminated completely. Keep in mind, we all say, every empire did that. Everyone did that. Did they?
No.
Did they? Like, we go on and on and on about, freedom and democracy and human rights and women's oppression and overseas and have to wear veils and this and that. Hang on a second. Islamic civilizations never committed a genocide in their lives. America has, and they're committing another one now, currently, supported by the democratic countries. So how do they get away with this? Not only do they control the media, they've got documents like their constitution originally. We don't do that. We got government for the people, by the people. They always have documents as proof to say we didn't do it. Look, we don't do it. But it's not what you say, it's what you do. They've actually done that. Now, they know full well that, let's take, for example, the Islamic governments. They're not. They're the friends of the US because they wouldn't behave half of what they're doing if they were truly religious. They're not. The real Islamic government that they overthrew in past decades to bring this system in had property rights. They had abolished, they didn't want the European feudalist system. They got rid of it in the 7th century.
Yeah.
Private property was brought in. gold and silver. Gold is the dinar, and the silver is the dirham. The value is in the coin. This is why they're always under attack.
Yes.
Everything they accuse others of is what they are doing. So the reason they want all of this, like they say, human shields and everything like that, that's what Israel does. And again, remember, you're dealing with a system here that hasn't just pinched resources, it's pinched concepts from that part of the world.
Yeah.
It pinched the religion from that part of the world, where they make you believe that Jesus was a white man and that Jesus is an American. Hang on a second. Like, this is, again, every religion is evil. No. The experience they're talking about is Western Christianity. What about Eastern Christianity? What about Islam? They train you to believe in a certain way so that you don't look at the big picture. And I'll just say this very, very quickly. When we say the concepts pillaging, things like the rule of law, that was taken from the Islamic world. The 12-man jury system, hey, that was taken from Sicily. You go back to where Islam was 1,000 years ago in places like Sicily, Spain, this and that. When they were overthrown and people said, no, we want you to get out of here, they left the system in place because they said it's working. They didn't wind it back. And now it's become indigenous to Europe without looking at where its origin was. The scientific method. Now, Ibn al-Haytham came up with this centuries, we're talking maybe 5-6 centuries before Francis Bacon did. Galileo and Newton and Da Vinci have taken ideas from that part of the world, from the Middle East under Islam. So it's in the AD era, not the BC era. The idea of having a 3-course meal, that's a Middle Eastern concept. Coffee, that's Middle Eastern. Astronomy, so many stars have got Arab names.
Yeah.
Alchemy becoming chemistry, because alchemy was to do with superstition and magic, and they wanted to remove the pagan element. So they brought it into what we call modern chemistry now, that's based on the scientific method with empirical evidence. Agriculture, much of Europe's land was un-arable. Who taught them how to, grow things and do things with the sand, and a couple more things. Thus, working out the diameter and circumference of the Earth without a calculator, without a computer.
Yes.
Down to this day, they came within a decimal point of the accurate answer. And finally, things like the chair, the chairperson, the chairman, that comes from the university where only the professor has a chair. The speaker has the chair. That's an Islamic concept. Medicare comes from the Waqf system, WAQF. These are not Western ideas that you've got people boasting about. It's a copy and paste job.
I know, we know.
We're dealing with an imposter. We're dealing with an imposter. No, I'm just saying we're dealing with an imposter. And like I said, I'll finish with this point.
Right.
I'll finish with this point.
Let him go.
I'll finish with this point, otherwise it'll make no sense, right? I should have done it in 2 goes. I apologize. I owe you 3 beers. Anyway, and you too. Now, what it is that if you're coming from the secular angle, you can say it's greed and corporations and one worldism. But the other angle is it a messianic agenda? I yield.
Look,
thank you, Ray. Sue, have you got anything meaningful to add?
There's a lot to digest there, isn't there?
Yeah,
it's very hard to comment on someone's lifetime of study and inner standing. I just know that whatever's going on is pretty evil, and we've got to overcome it.
Yeah.
And that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
Because we, and I'm not pissing in our pockets, sorry for the slang words, but we have taken it upon ourselves to have a go. And I don't care what anyone says. The naysayers, they can criticize us all they like. At least we're doing something about it. I yield.
Exactly right. Anita, have you got anything deep and meaningful to add?
Oh, we've been discussing this as well, Ray and I, earlier on today. So it's good to hear it again because you understand it, and then or you think you understand, and when you hear it again, you make more connections. So it's about looking at it, discovering it for yourself, and then maybe sleep on it until you basically get it. So there's a lot in there. And like Sue has said, it's a lifetime study for Ray, and for us to hear it the first time or second time or third time, we need to dig into it for ourselves so that we can really comprehend it, because it's much more complicated, I think, than what we think. We're only being fed bits and pieces, as per usual.
I think that's true. I think, as many other things, we are realizing that we've been sold a lie. And right at the moment, radical Islam is being pushed. And, I would say radical because radical is different. And this is different Islam. It's not actual Islam. And we probably need to actually really, again, this comes back to word magic. We're going to have Susie on the call in a couple of weeks talking about words and spells.
Yes.
But radical Islam, if you think about that, that is different Islam. So when we think about Islam, I was talking to Ray a week ago, I suppose, and we had a very long conversation, and he's telling me about slavery and how it used to happen in Islam. And I went, so slavery is like what Centrelink is now. And he went, yeah, pretty much. So it probably gave the people a lot more dignity than Centrelink does. So, it was a better version of Centrelink.
You said something really interesting there, Sarah. You said we've been sold a lie.
Yeah.
But we have to take responsibility. We bought the lie.
Yeah, true.
So, we talk about freedom, like we want freedom, and really the greatest value is our own worth, recognizing that nobody should be putting that down, or nobody should be putting anyone else down. But with freedom comes like responsibility, and our responsibility is not to buy the lie.
No.
We have to see the truth for what it is, and then make a decision not to follow with that, not to comply. And a lot of people learned, that hang on a minute, I'm not going to comply. A lot of people have learned that the last 5 years. So we have to stop complying to the lies when we see them. And like Anna always says, learn to be discerning, learn to trust your own gut, learn to realize that you do have great worth, no more than anyone else, but no less either. So anyway, I yield there.
Very wise words. Now, Ray, I'm going to let you speak, but there's a time limit on it, okay? Righto, away you go.
Totally get it. Totally love you, Wayne, for giving me the chance, and Sarah and the others too. No, I was just going to say that's why I created that Telegram group, so that we can look at all these other things that do affect us, because it doesn't hurt for us to do both. We can do both. We can do what we're doing, but be mindful of the bigger picture. And very quickly to finish what Sarah was saying, when I had that conversation with Sarah about slavery, and I haven't put anything up yet, it's that we have this image of what slavery is, but we don't understand that a God-fearing civilization like Islam regulated things like that. They knew there was always going to be unfortunate people in society, but they regulated it. And what that meant was that, yeah, they've done some stuff that they're not proud of and are wrong in history. But when you compare it to the transatlantic slave trade, where you had no upward mobility, right? A slave in Islam had to live with their masters. They had to be given the same food, the same clothes, the same treatment as, the master. They could ask for their freedom, and they had to be released. They could become, they could open businesses and work for the government. They could become richer than their master. And at the same time, you research the Mamluk dynasty in Egypt, their ancestors were slaves. So they made it all the way up to a royal family position. So the way we've been taught is like, slavery is all down, but that's the transatlantic version. I yield.
Probably better than the current version, I think, anyway, by the
Well,
sound of it.
I don't know. As I said, when Ray was describing it to me, I went, well, it sounds like Centrelink, just better regulated and
Oh,
managed better. And, and it with more dignity. Um,
but at least there's five of us here, but there's so many more across the planet and the world. We're doing something about this at least. We're having a go. We're not sitting back and saying, oh, well. So at least if we don't try, we've already failed. We're trying and we should be proud of this.
I think we are. I think it's just, and it doesn't hurt all of us to remind ourselves and each other, that I don't know, there's stuff going on in the world at the moment, like soccer this week. Now, I don't follow soccer, and some people do, and I get that. If you've got a background where soccer's important, totally understand it. But seriously, the mania over soccer this week, it really is the whole circus part of bread and circuses.
Oh, yeah.
Because, I was talking to a school teacher friend of mine, and she said, oh no, they've given the kids the time off to go and watch the soccer game in the gym or wherever. And I'm like, you what? Um, I just I, something about it really bothers me, and I'm starting to get highly suspicious of things that are really pushed. So
Oh, yeah.
like this Carl Stefanovic thing, I don't listen to Carl Stefanovic at all. I think he's a tool, but in all senses of the word. But my opinion, allegedly. Um, but really, this whole Carl Stefanovic, Tommy Robinson, Pauline Hanson, blah, 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 it's all a bit designed. And if something's
Oh.
really being pushed at you and thrown at you on, every media channel that you turn on and whatever, I'd be kind of looking at it going, what don't they want us to see? So here I have a video that's on YouTube of this guy standing out front of the Federal Reserve building in Melbourne saying it's been shut down, which personally I would be concerned about. That's the main Bank of Australia. That's the one that funds us. All of our Centrelink payments and everything comes from the Federal Reserve. It's closed down. Like what now? Now, I'm not saying it's not being managed somewhere else, but surely the Federal Reserve being boarded up should be cause for some kind of comment. But no, watch the soccer. That's important.
Well, Carl Stefanovic should have told us.
And
So
but
should
Hey,
the redhead. She should have mentioned it as well.
well, Pauline
Sarah,
should have
what do you
mentioned it.
reckon? I'll send Pauline Hanson a link to my Telegram group. What do you reckon, eh?
You could do that. She might be. Look, you know what? Queensland reckon that they've been and talked to what's his name? Is it Jared Rennick? One of her, not minions. That's not a nice word to say. One of the people that work in One Nation, um, and he's right across TASA. So I think Pauline knows a lot more than what she actually comes across as, but she's deciding for whatever reason, she's fighting in the system or she thinks she could do more good in the system at this stage. I don't know. I'm not speaking for her. I can't make assumptions. But then she goes and does things like wear the Israeli flag or scarf into Parliament. Like,
But I
it's like
wasn't,
you may
I
as well just
wouldn't,
say,
yeah,
yes, I've been bought by these guys.
yeah.
All that
I,
stuff that she's done in the last 6 months, that hasn't been done by her. That's a program. It's a
Yeah.
campaign.
Who's
She's been jacked
who's
up.
writing the script?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like who's writing the script? Like for all of them. That's
Yeah. We
yeah.
know
and I
that,
was joking. I was joking when I said I'd send her a link. I
No,
mean,
send her one.
how can I say it without being disrespectful? Like, you can teach ignorant because they don't know. They genuinely don't know. You can teach ignorant, but you cannot teach arrogant. So it's time wasted on the likes of her. That's my opinion. I yield.
I don't know that she's arrogant, but I think she's
I think she is. I believe she is. She's the type that, you know, she has been got the blinkers on. She can't see the wood for the trees. This business with the Israel and all of that, the comments she made about, Aboriginals, it was in the past, and now she's talking about, supporting Israel over Palestine. She's in approval of and not speaking against two genocides. To me, that says a lot about her character.
It's all about, like, who's backing her.
Mm.
It's not what's happened with her and with Stefanovic. It's not organic growth.
It's not organic.
No.
No,
It's not.
no.
So there's a campaign. There's something behind it all.
Yeah.
We don't know what it is yet, but
I know what it is. I reckon they're just trying to get closer to an ideal that we're all striving for,
yeah,
make it sound like they're going that way because they need to appeal to the masses. And the masses are moving away.
Mm.
So they're like latching on to ideas that will fly. And then the moment the vote comes in, makes no difference. The agenda rolls on. The agenda will not change. It's already been written.
Yeah.
They just want to get in. You know, they
you're
lie.
saying
Like, that's what evil does. It convinces you that you are not worthy enough to have your own like strength to believe the truth, and you need someone else to do it for you. And none of us do. We do need to work together, but I don't need someone to do it for me. I know if I want to not go hungry and they're going to close down the food supply, I better get into that vegetable garden and grow some stuff.
Yeah.
I better talk to my neighbours and make sure we can swap around, you know, eggs and meat and fuel maybe. But we'll look after one another, you know, and it doesn't take a lot, you know, like a dozen people in your area, a dozen families, you can be pretty self-sufficient. So that's problem number one gone.
but we think like that, all of us, and a lot of people that we know. But if you were living in an apartment in the middle of a suburb in Sydney, you don't think like that.
But they've got to get out and say hi to their neighbours, and then they will think like that.
There are places in the
Yeah.
cities. I mean, Gardening Australia talks about it on, ABC. God help us, I watch the ABC for Gardening Australia and Landline only. But they talk about city kind of community gardens, and people are aware of it. And I guess the thing is, it's about, as Sue said, taking your blinkers off and having a really long, hard look and going, okay, what's being pushed upon me? And what am I not hearing? And where can I go for alternative forms of information? And, you know, at some level, you'll figure out, I mean, everything's got its own agenda. Just because someone's alternative doesn't mean it's true. But somewhere in there, you'll start to weed out what feels right for you. And you'll sort of tend to move in that direction. And there's many pathways to the right way. But what I would encourage everyone to do is this has been brought home to me very strongly, very recently. And I think I've talked about it before. I'd made an assumption and I hadn't realized I'd made the assumption because it just when you assume that everyone knows something and then you realize, oh, actually, it's like assuming when you're a little kid that everyone can smell rain. You just think they do because you can do it, so it's normal. So everyone should be able to smell rain. And then you realize, actually, no, there's a massive percentage of the population that can't. And I think we make assumptions all the time about what we know is everyone knows that or everyone thinks that. And I think sometimes it's good to go out and look at things that you vehemently disagree with just to see what other people are thinking. And you might not agree with it, but it might make you think, oh, okay, I don't agree with what that person's saying, but that thing that specific point is, and it might be a little chink, and you go, is there something with that I can look at and go, okay, I might be able to perceive it from their point of view. I don't have to agree with it, but I can look at it from their point of view and I can kind of understand where they're coming from. And that way is the way to open yourself to different ideas and different ways of thinking. And I think the more we can train ourselves to do that, I think we're moving into Alice in Wonderland territory, people. We're moving into 6 impossible things, not just before breakfast, but before your morning coffee. And the more we can crack our brains open and think about things outside of what our norm is, the better off I think we'll all be.
Right. And I think we better begin to wind down with that comment. We've been going for a while. But was it last week, Ray, you told us a joke? Or was it the week before?
last week.
Can I finish off with the joke? Is that all right? Because
Perfect, go for it.
it got me thinking. If I thought, well, if Ray knows jokes, well, fuck it, I know jokes too. So a man and his wife were traveling around the world. They got to the Holy Land, Jerusalem, I think it was. Now, don't try and correct me on the specifics of this, Ray. But anyway, it was Jerusalem, I think, and his wife died. She passed away. So he went to whatever the Jerusalem version of an undertaker is. And he said, well, what am I going to do? I'll have to get a home to bury her. So he did a bit of a quote, and he said, well, it'll cost you $10,000 to bury her here, and that'll be done. But he said, if you want to fly the body home and bury her in Terra Australis, it's going to cost you $80,000. The bloke didn't even blink. He said, I'll pay the 80 grand. The undertaker said, why would you do that? That's a lot of money. He said, well, I've heard stories where you buried a bloke over here quite some time ago and he was back in 3 days. He said, I can't take that chance.
Nice one.
And on
Okay.
that,
Okay.
Nice one.
I'm going to leave you with that. We're out of here. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for your input, your energy, and everything else. Thank you.